Howdy, my name is Astrama, and welcome back to the Cosmic Chaos, or if you're new here, welcome. This is kind of a different video, as it is kind of a storytime sort of video. And it's also a little bit of a sad one, since there were some events that happened recently that I kind of want to process a little bit by doing this post-mortem thing. Anywho, before we get into that, the background footage for today's video is the cover page for the comic I nearly gave up on, as the title says. With that out of the way, on to the story. Before we start, I will be getting vulnerable during this, and I will be mentioning a very low time of my life that negatively impacted my view of my comic. And this involves events that led to me absolutely breaking. So trigger warning for mentions of pet death and mental health issues. For some context, Dragons of Light is one of two Kingdom Hearts fanfictions that I am currently writing. It follows the story of Akari Duty and her two friends who lose their world to Erebus, a corrupted Draconian. They join forces with Terra and set off to complete a rather incomplete prophecy surrounding the Crystalline Trio. Oh yeah, and there's dragons. Need I say more? Anyways, I started this project back in 2020, right before the Panini happened. My sibling and I did a comic race where if you wrote and drew out a full chapter, one of us would be the victor. I won that race when I wrote and drew out the prologue Encounter. Fast forward to summer that year, and I began the pre-production. I would chip away at practicing design conventions for dragon types, making concepts for costumes and forms the characters would take on, and even begin writing the story. I would chip away at the very first journal, may that trooper rest in peace, and keep in mind, I was starting college at this time, which then became a very stressful time in my life. But I still continued to work on my comic. It did have a slow start, with Chapter 1 releasing in June of 2021, and Chapter 2 releasing in December of that same year. Chapter 3 would be the only chapter I would post in 2022. Not bad, considering I was juggling school and this project at that time. But it's when the tail end of 2022 and going into 2023 was when things began to really fall apart. For the fall semester of 2022, I got my first job working at dining services at my university's union. I was getting used to the reality that I had cut off my dad the year prior. That's a story for another day. Fall of 2022 became a nightmare to manage because I was juggling school, my online social life, my comic, and my very first job. To say I was stressed out would be a massive understatement, and 2022 became the beginning of when all of my mental health issues began to boil to a head. It was hard to manage classes and the job, but fortunately with the dining services job, they have to make the schedule around your class schedule in order to allow you to focus on your studies. So in a way, that was kind of my saving grace. But then 2023 occurred. At this point, I had drawn so much to the point of chronic tendinitis, which, mind you, hurts especially bad during the winter months, and I was drawing to the point where art went from self-soothing to self-harming. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but needless to say, I am very and genuinely grateful for the friends who finally got me out of that state of denial. I was beginning to heal my relationship with art. That was until my cat Minion died. It was a sudden loss, and it really hurt me, my sibling, and mother. That week of grieving hurt a lot and made a very large crack in what remained of my mental stability. I posted Chapter 4 on February 26th of last year. That was the only chapter I would post that year. You'll see why very soon. In May of 2023, we decided that we were ready to adopt two kittens, an adorable yet crazy calico we named Coco, and a sweet and timid tuxedo cat we named Angel. We only had the kittens for 3 weeks by that point, where, unfortunately, Angel would succumb to what we can only assume to be fading kitten syndrome. He died while I was going to get something to help him to at least eat something on June 9th, 2023. He was a sweet kitten, and I miss him every day still. 3 weeks wasn't enough, but I hope it was enough for Angel to know he was loved and cared for. Angel's death was the nail in the coffin, and I broke. I really struggled with summer classes that semester, and overall, I was at my lowest point. I broke down the Friday after Angel had died. But what does this have to do with me almost giving up on my comic? I'll get to that now. You see, making comics, it isn't a sprint. It's more so like a marathon. one that requires a lot of time to be dedicated into making pages, and oftentimes does test your fortitude and persistence when taking on such a project. Because of the state of my mental health at that particular moment in time, depression really took a hold of me. I'm not going to deny that. I was pretty much broken and felt like a shell of myself. I was still grieving over the loss of 2 cats in 1 year, the fact that I was so burned out because of college and now work. And overall, things just got kind of dark for me for a while until I finally took steps to better myself. Even with school and work the following fall semester, I was slow in making pages for Chapter 5 in particular. There were many times, especially going into 2024, where there was that little voice in my head that just kept saying, just give up on this project. You're already struggling, so why bother keeping up with it? Somehow, and I don't know how and why, I ignored that voice in my head. And I continued to slowly chip away at Chapter 5 until I posted it on May 18th of this year. Not gonna lie, part of me does question why I didn't listen to that voice in my head. I remember talking to some friends in a VC while working on a project for an upcoming video, and they would have absolutely understood if I stopped making Dragons of Light after I told them, what was going on behind the scenes. But in a way, Chapter 5, as hard as it was to sit down most days to work on it, even with school and work, kind of just bogging me down, it honestly means a lot to me. As much as I don't really associate it with positive things, considering so many things happened in 2023, it was still there during that time period. It kept me grounded on days where I wasn't feeling the best, and deep down, I just didn't want to give up. I chose to keep going, and Chapter 5 is a testament to that. The moment I finished the last page of Chapter 5 and shared it to my friends, I'm not ashamed to admit that I actually cried. It was a very sweet, bittersweet send-off for that particular chapter. The chapter that, despite having less than kind feelings towards it, despite it taking almost a year to create, and the fact that because of everything that I had been through, it just, I don't know, it really is a testament to the determination and stubbornness I had, as well as strength that I genuinely did not know that I actually have because of the things I went through ever since 2018 up until this point. I know it was significant for me to stick out this one chapter until its end, and I know it's very silly that I would cry over sending off Chapter 5 the way I did, but I want you guys to understand that I could have very easily given up. That I could have just said, fuck it, I don't want to work on this project anymore. I kind of just don't want to do comics anymore, despite being an amateur and just originally doing this fan fiction for fun. But in a way, it would have been a disservice to the young me who had dreams of making their own comics, their own manga, who was inspired by so many manga that they had read, especially D. Grayman, the one source of inspiration that pushed her to want to make comics. And that person is still me. And the fact that I did stick with this project, as much as Chapter 5 really, really gave me struggles, I think I'm doing young me a service by sticking this out through until, this point in time. I think it was worth it, posting this chapter and actually drawing it out. It's finally posting it means that I can finally move on to the chapters I'm most excited about, to find joy in making pages again. Hell, Chapter 6, the very next chapter, it's one of those chapters I'm the most excited for. Mainly because, one, it's no longer in the toy box, but two, it's because I can do something different with Olympus. And that's what excites me about finally getting to the top of this mountain that bogged me down for over a year. Well, not over a year, almost a full year. And while this mountain was a bitch to climb, it was absolutely worth it, as I can now finally see the view from up here. Metaphorically speaking, that is. I think the main takeaway from this story is this. Sometimes life will kick you down. It will continue to kick you while you're down. But deep down, there is that kind of strength in you that pushes you to stand back up. Even if you have to rest for a while, it's that very strength that stays with you during adversity. And it's what pushes you to stand back up, even when you feel like you can't continue. And honestly, I think that's a lesson that I've definitely learned. And I know it's silly considering I really did almost want to not really continue this project. Sorry for that stutter. But like, I don't know, it feels great. Like finally finishing something that gave me so much trouble. And there we have it. I know this was a more personal video. I think having a post-mortem for chapter 5 of my comic kind of helped me process this a little bit. As for where you can see my comic, you may be wondering. Right now it's a friends only thing, but I do have plans of posting old and new pages to my socials later on. Like once I leave the Kingdom Hearts Amino, or just Amino in general, I don't really post on there anymore, so why bother? Yeah, that is basically it. I know this was a very sad story. Well, I wouldn't say very sad, just kind of a more somber one, and definitely more vulnerable for me. But I do hope that y'all enjoyed this little story time, and I hope to one day continue working on pages and sharing my progress with you guys. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to me ramble. If you would like, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I will see you all in the void again real soon. Take care, and in times where you feel like you want to give up, it never hurts to rest for a while before you do pick yourself back up and continue. Goodbye.